Here's Brody Brazil.
The approval process for a ballpark at Howard Terminal is very difficult to understand and even follow, for that matter. I know because I get a ton of questions about, well, what comes next in this process? And then what's after that? And what ultimately leads to shovels in the ground so that the stadium can become a reality? Well, nothing's going to get the wheels turning faster than binding votes. And good news, binding vote season is officially upon us. We do have one date and one entity that's going to go first or next, depending on how you see it. We don't know all the rest of the dates. We do know the others that have to have these votes. We don't really have a timeline. So that's what this video is all about. If I had to guess, and if I had to make some educated guesses, here's how I could see it playing out in the rest of 2022 for the A's, the City of Oakland, the County of Alameda, and this beautiful site at Howard Terminal. Let's begin with the San Francisco BCDC, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. They, for sure, are holding a huge vote, for sure, on the 30th of June. Now, this vote, it needs to pass. It needs a yes. Otherwise, this project comes to an almost immediate halt. It can't go much further if they can't get the land approved to build the stadium. So, to be clear, the BCDC, they're not actually voting on the project of Howard Terminal. They're voting more on the land, and specifically port priority use removal of the 50-plus acres at Howard Terminal. This site has been part of the Port of Oakland. Technically, it is, but it's also detached from all the rest of the Port of Oakland shipping land. It has not been used since 2013. And so what the BCDC is doing is looking at how the project would operate, how it's been approved with an EIR, and what the shipping forecast looks like for the next several decades, not just at the Port of Oakland, but also all of the other Bay Area seaports, to make sure that these 50 acres could be repurposed for something like this development and a ballpark. Now, the good news is the BCDC's staff, not their actual voting members, but their staff, it's paid to do this, they have already recommended favoring the project and removing port priority use at Howard Terminal. Hundreds of pages of documents, many hours of research and presentation. They've gone through everything in a very detailed fashion, and they are recommending a yes vote. Now, that would only happen if 18 of the 27 voting members on June 30th say yes. So I've watched their meetings. They had a hearing at the beginning of June. I have a pretty good feeling about this, not going to lie. But at the same respect, like I said before, you understand this needs to happen with a yes. Otherwise, it literally means the end of the Howard Terminal ballpark project. And who knows what comes next after that for the Oakland A's. This is imperative. This is a domino piece that has to fall so it can hit the next one and so that the next one falls. If this one doesn't fall, we're stopped and we're done for a definite time being. So, now that that's established, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but I do want to discuss what would come after this. How about the September 20th date for the City of Oakland? We've not really ever heard that before. Why would we? But it kind of unintentionally, I think, came out today in a County of Alameda meeting that my friend and former colleague, Casey Pratt, happened to be monitoring. They brought up Howard Terminal, and it was said by the county they're pretty sure that the City of Oakland is targeting a September 20th date to vote, to have a binding vote on Howard Terminal. Now, I'm not here to tell you that's for sure. Again, this is largely educated speculation, but it also does make a ton of sense when you consider that the City of Oakland and their council members, they're going to go on their summer break from July 25th through August 31st. And taking up a vote before then is difficult because the BCDC themselves, they're not voting until the 30th of June, And as of right now, there's still not a community benefits agreement or a development agreement between the A's and the City of Oakland. So we're talking about maybe a 3-week window if they had everything lined up and ready to go. And even if the BCDC vote, goes as expected, and certainly the city doesn't seem like they want to vote before the BCDC, why would they? Let that happen, and then you can go next. It's kind of like baseball. You don't have two batters in batters boxes. Somebody's got to be in the on-deck circle waiting to hit next. Okay, so it's understandable that this will likely happen after the summer break. And it's already been discussed by the city that they want to have a get-together of committee members to do education and research, kind of like probably a public hearing that they'd like to have at the beginning of September, which would make a ton of sense. It gives them a couple weeks to go over everything, have all their questions answered, and then eventually do a September 20th vote. So if I had to guess, I don't think it's likely or extremely possible that the City of Oakland votes on anything before the 25th of July. I think it's after that, and I think this September 20th date seems reasonable, and it seems very feasible. And I also want to say, with this September 20th potential vote, you also need to realize that in the fall, as part of the election, Oakland is going to choose a new mayor, and there's going to be several new city council members. So from the A's perspective, and not only the pressure that Major League Baseball is likely putting on them to get this stadium deal done, it also makes only a ton of sense that the A's get this done with the current council members and the current mayor who they've been working with now for years. Why would you want to shuffle that deck and hope that everybody in the next version of this feels the exact same way and they've put in all the research that the prior group did? It's not guaranteed that they will or they would, or they have or they would. So September 20th feels pretty likely. If it could be a little bit before, a little bit after, but that to me seems like a pretty logical place to start. All right, and that brings us to the County of Alameda. Now, they would likely only go after the City of Oakland has had their vote. And the backstory is, watching their get-togethers, watching their discussions over time, they do seem favorable to the IFD, which is the Infrastructure Financing District. And that's basically their biggest thing to approve in this project. How to take the new tax money only generated by this project to only pay for the needed infrastructure surrounding the Howard Terminal and Jack London site. Does that make sense? Because even that's complicated. I think I have other videos on this. The Infrastructure Financing District, essentially the way to create new taxes only because of the project, not for anybody else in the neighborhood, only the Howard Terminal site, so that it can pay for its own infrastructure improvements to start off with over the years. And then once it's paid back, which the A's are fronting it generously, then that's it. It's done. Alameda seems favorable to that. And I also don't see how they would ever get ahead of the city in the voting process here, right? In the same way that the city is looking at the BCDC and saying, we'll go after you. It seems like the County of Alameda is looking at the city and saying, you know what? We'll go after you. Okay, they're lining up. Again, this is like a team hitting the baseball. Somebody's in the batter's box, somebody's in the on-deck circle, and somebody's in the hole, in the dugout ready to go too. So Alameda County technically in the hole. You would also understand that they're not ready to take a vote either until they see a community benefits agreement or a development agreement finalized. But I think you also have to look at this. Think about the momentum that would build if the BCDC says yes, and then the City of Oakland says yes, which I still believe, although the BCDC has to happen, the City of Oakland vote would push this through as well. That is the one that carries the most weight. And think about if those two things happen, and then it gets to the County of Alameda. And I put TBD here because I don't know when that would take place, but I would assume it would be sometime before the end of 2022. I think that's very likely, actually. Think of the momentum. I mean, they could still say no. They could be the ones to halt things or slow things or delay things. But I just feel like if everybody else has seen the bright side of this, I think they will too. And for good reason. So I do think there is the aspect of momentum here. Okay, so just to summarize, the BCDC on June 30th. Oakland, maybe September 20th, and Alameda, probably late 2022. I realize we all wish this could happen within several days. We could get some answers here. I also realize that for fans of the Oakland A's as a baseball team, this season has been rough already and could potentially get even more difficult. But I am here to remind you, the most important thing for this franchise in its 50-plus years in Oakland is this year, and it has nothing to do with baseball. It has everything to do with these binding votes. So if I had to guess, I think September is going to be huge. Well, June 30th is huge. September is going to be huge, and probably October, maybe even into November. But I do feel confident here in June of 2022 that the rest of this calendar year is going to bring us multiple binding votes and the answers that will ultimately lead to putting a shovel in the ground at that site.